Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Ashok Reddy, General Manager of Broadcom's Enterprise Software Division.
So, good morning. My name is Ashok Reddy. I'm responsible for the Enterprise Software Division within Broadcom. And today we actually have a fantastic presentation from one of our customers, Arnold, who's going to come in a few minutes here and talk about how they've transformed KPN to be one of the leading provider using AI and machine learning to not only from a technology perspective, but also how they've transformed looking at people and applying technology, but transforming people to remove the silos. So that's going to be the focus of the presentation. But just from a Broadcom, for many of you may not have heard about Broadcom, at least in the context of Gartner. So just as a brief introduction, so CA Technologies, which was a company I was part of, got acquired last year by Broadcom. Broadcom is a semiconductor-focused company for many years. It's a leading provider, 21 divisions. And today, if you think about what Broadcom does, we talk about connecting everything. So 99.9% of the world's data actually is connected or goes through Broadcom technology today. So every cell phone you use, when you connect to Wi-Fi or a cell, it's connected by Broadcom. So every manufacturer of phones, Apple, Samsung, Google's, everybody uses Broadcom. Every cloud data center, every public cloud uses Broadcom technology to connect. So that's really at a high level what Broadcom does, but Broadcom is now getting into software because everything is becoming software defined and really applying AI and machine learning. Google, for example, uses our AI chips to power the entire Google Cloud. So similarly, when you look at all the public cloud providers, they're using networking. So that's at a high level what Broadcom is. A $24 billion company. We invest heavily in R&D, close to almost $5 billion for a $24 billion company. When you compare that to somebody like IBM, $75 billion in revenue, and IBM spends about $5 billion in R&D. So very technology-centric company. So let me focus more on what we are here today, so which is really talking about companies. For everyone here, you're focused on becoming a digital business, but you start with what business outcomes you're trying to drive. So at a high level, I think if you're a CEO, your CEOs are focused on the top one, which is really around attracting customers and growing revenues, which means you need to be continuously connected to your customers. When you're a digital business, your customers are available to you 24/7. You have to create experiences 24/7. The second thing is you're focused on increasing speed and agility across your organization. You may be using things like DevOps and others in IT, but how does it connect to the business outcome of driving revenues and transforming experience? Each of these things, improving productivity and efficiency is important. And some of you may be focused on security, digital trust. But everyone actually has their own metrics today. We just conducted a survey of CEOs and CIOs to understand if every company is becoming a software company, how is the business and technology and IT teams working together? What you'll find is 68% of the CEOs and business leaders feel like still IT and technology is not aligned with what they're trying to drive from outcomes perspective. And similarly, on the IT side, technology software leaders are saying they don't get enough support from the business. So we actually have this study available to you. It is something we conducted in the last 3 months worldwide. And part of it is like when we look at different teams, what we find is you actually have everyone has their own metrics. It's really not about as much of alignment. So if you look at the development teams, the operations team, the DevOps teams, which Arnold is going to talk about, each one has their own metrics. At the high level, if you're trying to drive customer experience, the DevOps teams thinks that I can deploy software 500 times a day, or you have code commits, you've got cycle time. But are you really connected to the business outcomes, what somebody is driving at the business? So the alignment is not as much as how do you actually fuse IT and business together. So what we are looking at is if you're really transforming customer experience, you need to look at the different silos in your organization and provide them the visibility across the organization so there is transparency, and everybody is working towards the same outcome. And this is an example of transform experience. You'll see that somebody who is in product owners and product managers may be driving lead and cycle times so that you can get feedback faster. And development is trying to drive release health, and they're trying to, then availability becomes important because transformation by definition is change. When you're introducing change constantly into your production, you're fighting against stability and reliability and security. But you still want change in a digital world. So how do you do that? So at a high level, I think what we find is customers who are successful in this are bringing DevOps principles to the business. You can think about, we call it BizOps, which is really about bringing operations, digital operations to support the business. So when we talk about AIOps, it's about how do I prevent the business impact to your running applications and your customer experience in the first place before it happens. You don't want to be reactive. You want to find the signal from the noise. So what we'll do is to kind of talk about how KPN has done this from an AIOps perspective. And then I'll connect it back later on. I'll be back at the end to talk about how you can bring that AIOps to inform your business and development leaders to drive their decisions and the business outcomes. So with that, Arnold, I would like to introduce you to Arnold, who is our Chief Product Owner from KPN. And he'll talk about the journey and your own company's transformation.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm Chief Product Owner, not from KPN, not for KPN. I'm just a small part of that, right? So I'm concerned with, at the CTO office, concerned with software strategy, like open source policies and stuff like that. I'm also a member of the digital transformation team. And a side hobby of mine is sustainability, so how technology can actually help sustainability within our company. So KPN is a leading Dutch telecommunications provider. There's a small introduction here. So we're probably one of the oldest telecommunications companies in the world. We started in 1852, and we've always been on the front end of technology, of society, and of sustainability for the last 10, 15 years. And these are actually also the things that make me very proud of the company. To start with the latter, we've been using green energy, 100% green energy since 2011. We've been CO2 neutral since 2015. For the last 8 executive years, we've been in the top 3 globally of the most sustainable telcos. And actually this year, we've been voted or incorporated by Corporate Knights, a leading American magazine, as one of the 100 most sustainable companies in the world. So it really makes me really proud because I'm concerned about the environment. But what also makes me proud is we're right in the middle of our society. So we really feel our social responsibility. For instance, we have an elderly phone line for older people that feel lonely. They can call, they get a volunteer from KPN on the phone just to chat, just to make the life a little bit less lonely. We organize dinners for homeless people. We have a child helpline. We have klassencontact, which means that when a kid gets sick and needs to stay at home, we provide him with a virtual connection, a virtual machine in the classroom and at home so he can follow the classes, etc., etc. So every year I donate my Christmas gift, the money, towards klassencontact so that we can buy another machine and provide another kid with some help. So this is really what makes me tick and what makes me enthusiastic about the job that I do. But now we're going to talk actually about data, right? So in 2017, The Economist said that data is the most valuable resource now. So it was oil, but today it's data. And actually data is growing and growing. And there's 2 aspects that make the amount of data grow. Like we need data for whatever reason. And the new technology generates a lot more data. So when we started in 2015, like the early 2000, actually it was, I think, late 2014, and the years before, we had within our company different business units. We had different service providers. We had different departments, layers of infrastructure and applications. Basically, we were a large corporation with silos just as you guys. And those silos had their own tools, own monitoring tools that were used to guarantee the service quality and the customer experience for our customers. However, since they were all organized in silos, we did not have an end-to-end view. We had problems troubleshooting a single workflow or a service quality experience. For instance, it really became very pregnant when our service performance degradation occurred. And so the performance was going really bad, right? But all the monitoring system in all the silos were green. So everybody said, it's not on my end, but still the servants didn't work. So it was very hard to find a root cause at that time. It was very hard to have those silos collaborate with each other because everybody said, no, it's not my fault. Why should I do all this effort? And there was basically no effective communication, and we had no end-to-end view. So we figured we need to change something. We need to get this information together across those silos. So we developed a vision for that. And the vision was actually very simple. It was not like a 40-page vision paper. It was just one picture. We had hindsight, and we wanted to move to insight and foresight. So when you have hindsight, you basically, something already happened, right? And you try to find out what happened. That was the situation we were in. We had to dig through log files, etc., to get the information. And it was very, very troublesome. So we wanted to move to insight. We wanted to get this information together, this data together, so we could see historic data and develop trends from it, and then get a feeling when something would get wrong, or if it went wrong, where, have a good feeling where it went wrong. But the ultimate goal is to move to foresight. So what should I do before it happens? So based on multiple realities and all the different disparate sets of data together, we actually want to predict when something is going to happen and take action, preferably automated action, before it happens. For that vision, we set out a architecture, a high-level architecture, also very simple, not very difficult. We had one of our largest monitoring teams who is providing services for over 12,000 of our business customers, monitoring services. They were already based on the CA technology. So we said, okay, let's expand that best of suite environment to the rest of our IT infrastructure and innovation departments. So far so good, right? So we started implementing. But at the same time, when we did this, when we developed the vision and when we developed this architecture and wanted to implement it, something else was going on in KPN. Our organization changed. So we went from an hierarchical organization into an agile transformation. It started at the innovation department, as with a lot of companies. But now, if you look at KPN now, the whole organization basically is agile. So we moved from an hierarchical organization based on procedures and functions, rank, etc., to a holacratic organization where the teams are based on functions, and they focus on the task at hand. So there's basically there is hierarchical, but there's less hierarchical, right? Can I see some hands? Who is in an agile transformation already has done that? A lot, right? Who is using scaled agile framework, SAFe? Okay, a lot of hands. Who's using less large-scale Scrum? Less hands. We're using less, actually. And less means less. So there was one person I saw raising hands. I'm curious about the experience. Less goes beyond SAFe. I mean, it's less managers, it's less architects, it's less process managers, it's less coordination roles. It's more self-experiment and more self-autonomy or more self-management. So the teams will get more autonomy. They need to collaborate and communicate because the coordination roles are not there anymore. Now you can imagine that in the first 1 or 2 years, this is very difficult if you go from a very hierarchical organization into a less framework, agile transformation. You need to find a new balance, right? People are not used to communicate a lot with each other. They were depending on other people to do that for them. So this was very hard. And at the same time, we had, a strict difference in the previous organization between development and operations. Development, innovation, got all the money because they were important, developing new capabilities. And operations was seen as a cost center, and they had to be cheaper and more efficient, but they were never allowed to fail. So when we put those teams together, you get a clash of objectives. Basically, Dev was used to fail fast, Ops was used to fail never, and now they were in the same team. And how do you get the certainty of that things still are working as it used to be? Yeah? So the Ops guy was sitting next to a Dev guy who was messing up all the time, and then the Ops guy would get nervous. Oh, that's not going into production because then I'm awake all night, right? And then so what happens is Ops needed to have more certainty through generating more data, basically. But in the less framework, with the autonomy of the teams, that also meant software chaos. All the teams decided to choose and pick and choose their own tools. This is just a subset. This is tools that you can get off the market or the open source, right? They build their own tools, I can tell you. So there's a lot of things going on in the different DevOps teams. So they created basically silos. Smaller silos than we had before with the business units and the service providers, but they were silos. They were granular, but a lot more. And how do you notice when you have DevOps silos? Actually, it's not that difficult. Since we have less coordinating roles, you very quickly find out that if you want to find somebody who's responsible for something, it's almost impossible. So let's say you want to change a capability in your billing systems, right? From a strategic point of view. And you have 20 billing applications. Who are you going to talk to? There's not a chief architect of that. There's not one product owner. Every billing application has its own product owner. So you need to collaborate with 20 people to get something done. That's really, really difficult. In the agile transformation, where the teams needed to find a new balance, right? You see a lot of inward focus. So we're trying to do stuff with less people. There's a huge cost pressure. We need to shrink as an organization. We've done this for the last 19 years, actually. The work package is still very high pressure. So what you get is an inward focus. People need to collaborate with each other. The teams need to collaborate, but they have an inward focus. They have their own backlog. They have their own priorities. They need to get things done with a lot less people. And you can see that when on the backlogs of the other teams, right? So I want to make a change with my team, but I'm dependent on the other team to also make a change. So something needs to be done on their backlog, but it doesn't have their priority. They have their own work pressure, their own backlog that needs to be done, right? So that's very difficult. And how do you see the result of that? Well, the number of incident of changes go up. One team changes something, not knowing, did not communicate with the other teams, not knowing that the other teams will have incidents from that change, because they needed to change also. Right? So what we see in the early stages when you do this transformation is that the number of incidents related to changes actually went up. So that's an indicator that the teams were not collaborating well enough with each other. So we have a changing organization with a huge need for more data, and we created our own little silos, a multitude of what we had before, right? But there's also something else was going on at the same time. Most of you cannot read it, but I thought it was a nice movie to indicate how technology changed our lives. And actually, this is reality. With our 5G field labs, we use autonomous driving with the tractors and the robots, and we guide them with the iPads and stuff like that. So this is not fantasy. This is actually happening. But so technology changed, right? Technology changes, and how does it change? It's mainly because of software. Software is eating the world, Mark Andreessen said a long time ago. He was a very visionary, and he's right. Software is eating the world. It's changing our industry just like your industries, right? So I developed, when my goal, my job was actually to look into the future. So I developed a software vision 2025, and part of that software vision is some key trends that shape our industry, our telco industry, and I bet it's exactly the same for your industry. So there's 6 major trends that really have a huge influence on our business and on our operations. Software-defined anything. So with the cloud and software-defined data center storage, software-defined networks, everything is becoming softwareized. And why? Because you can configure it dynamically, it makes changes easier, but to be honest, you can use generic hardware, you can use white box services. You don't need expensive appliances anymore to do stuff, right? So it's also a cost driver. The edge and microservices. Everybody's talking about cloud, even at this conference. To us, cloud is important, but the edge is more important. For us, it's an impossible, because of data, but also because of latency, to move everything to the cloud. Our customers, if they want to game, for instance, they want very small response times, right? If it needs to go up and down to the cloud, at a certain point, it's not enough anymore. Real-time augmented reality, autonomous driving, everything moves to the edge. So only relevant data will go to the cloud, but compute and a lot of local data will move to the edge. So we're not talking about one data center in the Netherlands. No, we're talking about 150 plus smaller data centers at the metropoles to facilitate this. So a lot of smaller components also on the application side. The future of applications is not an application anymore. It's a function as a service combined. So FaaS or microservices or whatever you want to call it, but it's becoming more granular, and you cannot just put a boundary on it. It's just all kinds of services combined that compile the customer journey. Seamless intelligence. Human intelligence, knowledge, and connectivity will be augmented by information technology. It will be seamless. Chips are already implanted, right, to perform some functions, and it will get more and more. Software self-development, very interesting. I believe in a future where software will code itself. And not only that, it will adapt fluidly to the reality it encounters and the context it's in. So so the software application or the combination of services can be specifically for you or for you in the context that you're performing. Open IP, we already saw that, TCP/IP, World Wide Web. Open source is growing tremendously. You can follow online courses for free. Has a huge impact on how you do your business and what tools you do your business with, but it also has an impact on your contract models. So you used to buy perpetual licenses, CAPEX, but everybody's moving to subscription-based licenses, OPEX. You're developing your tools, your applications yourself with open source tools, but also commercial vendors are implementing open source within their commercial software. So what does that mean for your contract models? What does it mean for your software license when you are running a microservice that only lives for a few seconds, but still uses the software? Are you going to be charged for that? Or is it part of your contract and you just measure it once a year? I don't think so. So this is going to change a lot in your company, right? These trends, not this year directly, but the next few years we'll see a lot of things happening in this space. So if I have a look at the granularity of components, let's take a brief look at history. We had mainframe. Approximately 20 years later, we had client server. Approximately 20 years later, we had cloud compute. Approximately 20 years later, so next year, edge is going to be the hype. I don't know what's going to be in 20 years, but there seems to be a trend right here. But not only the components got smaller and a lot more components, also the software that's in there, right, that's making use of that compute is getting smaller. And it's generating more and more data. So the amount of data is growing. There's a huge amount of data. And in the beginning, we were able to climb that, to deal with that amount of data, but now it's almost impossible to get on top of that mountain of data. And the guy on the right says, sorry, I'm Dutch, so he thinks I need a machine to get me on top, right? I need a helicopter or a car or whatever, but I cannot climb this anymore. So we need help, right? And why do we need help? Because basically, there's a difference between human and machine analytics. What's the difference? So I put in a copyright, the Arnold's formula of DevOps essence. I thought it was nice. You can copy it whatever you want. It's free. It's open. But and it's not exact science. Just to illustrate the difference between humans and machines. So humans are not that much good at analyzing data. Sure, if you have 1 and 1, you can analyze, okay, if we add it, it's 2, or if we subtract it, so it can do some basic analysis. But the bigger the numbers, the bigger the amount of data, the worse it gets, and you end up with a pile of potential actions that you can take on the analysis that a human did, right? For machines, it's the other way around. So we swap the conversion. Machines are very bad at small numbers of data, but they get better and better when the data grows. So the more data, the better the prediction, the correlation is. So if you give a machine a huge amount of data, probably you get only a few relevant actions that you need to take to remediate the incident or whatever. And that's a key difference. So taking the change in the organization, the DevOps silos, the multitude of tools, the growing need for data, the technology changes, the smaller components, the growing amount of components everywhere in our lives, generating more and more data, we need to get on top of that mountain. We need to get on top of that pile of data. And so it was time for a new strategy. Well, not a new strategy, but a new architecture. And our new architecture is, we still have our best of suite at this very large monitoring team, but we're implementing an AI and operations intelligence layer on top of that can collaborate with all the data from the other tools. It's not a simple task. It's complicated. It's not easy, but it surely will help us to overcome all the difficulties that we encountered in 2015 and before. So with this operations intelligence layer, we can facilitate the one truth that we're seeking for, right? We can overcome the fake news of, it's not on my side. It will combine all the tools and data. It will give us an end-to-end view. It will facilitate collaboration. It will facilitate information sharing, and actually it will lead to operational excellence and an increased quality of our service and customer experience. To illustrate our journey towards this point, anybody, a clue what this is? No, huh? I'm not surprised. Nobody really heard of this, I think. This is the Voynich script. It was discovered in 1912. It's carbon dated to the 15th century. It's a book containing a lot of text and pictures. It has chapters on astronomy, on nature, on human physicality. It has a drawing of a naked woman in there with all kinds of arrows pointing to stuff. So clearly it looks like some kind of encyclopedia, right? The only thing is that nobody has ever been able to decipher the text. World War II code breakers have tried it, and since then everybody has tried it, have not been able to decipher the text. It was until last year, in 2018, that the University of Alberta was able, through the help of AI, to decipher some sections of the book, to make sense out of it. And that's how I feel our journey is, right? We started out with undecipherable data because we couldn't correlate it and make sense out of it. And now through the help with machine learning and AI, we are able to at least decode some sections of our problems. And hopefully in the future we can decode the whole book. So with this new operation layer, again, we integrate all our smaller becoming components, the smaller becoming software functions, and integrate data from disparate tools. Is that all? No, I think there's a more future in it from an operational perspective. So what are potential future cases? Real-time business continuity. Why not put your security data in there too and have a real-time view? You know, you spin up some machines. Does that increase your vulnerability or not? If I can see real-time my single point of failures, stuff like that, right? If you combine your software asset management data into this AIOps, I can see when I spin up a Docker instance, does it comply with my contract or not? Right? I get real-time insight in how in my compliance towards certain contracts. This one I really like, real-time in-depth energy consumption. So if you have application performance monitoring, you know that the APM can see which part of your code is not running very smoothly, right? It's generating errors or it's not performing the way it should. What if we can link that or tie that to the energy consumption of the server? So we can discover which part of the code in your application or in your software is actually consuming more energy than other parts. So we can ask the software developer to have a look at it and maybe recode it. I don't know if you're aware of that, but at a certain threshold, CPU utilization is not linear anymore, but grows exponentially. I think it's around 70 or 80%. So why not spin up a machine before it reaches that 70%? Maybe that's more sustainable than have it run at 90% full time, you know? And last, it could facilitate digital transformation. You know, I'm also part of the digital transformation team. I have a hard time finding processes that I can automate. RPA is a band-aid, right? You want to automate really your internals. But how do you find the processes that contain manual activities when you're a company of 15,000 people, right? The easy things you already have done with RPA, but now you need to find the single activities in the whole customer journey that still are manual. With the topology and the real-time mapping, you can actually discover how your processes really work, where the endpoints are, and see where they're picked up again. Or the other way around, you can use your process mining data, put it in, and then see the whole customer journey online and offline in a transaction trace. So I think there's still more value to get from an AIOps environment. But artificial intelligence is not the holy grail. So we have data. Data is fact. We have information, information, that's different data combined. We have knowledge, which is basically what you do with information. And we have wisdom, and wisdom is knowledge combined with experience and intuition. I strongly believe that AI is not the answer to everything. I believe in augmented wisdom. So the combination of artificial intelligence, human experience, and intuition, I think that's what we really need for the near future. Thank you very much. I'll be available for questions after the session.
Great job. So in terms of summarizing, one of the things, we talk about KPN here, but we also find the similar use cases across all the telco providers worldwide. We work with AT&T, T-Mobile, Sprint. Everybody is trying to go through the same transformation, and especially with 5G, Arnold talked about the amount of data is only going to increase with the low latency, the number of devices all of us wear, everything about yourself. How do you actually process this with much lower latency? So what we find is companies are going through this. How do you actually get to all the data in the world in terms of the context of what problems you're trying to solve? And being able to apply that to the outcomes you're trying to solve, some of the things I talked about earlier. How do you transform customer experience? But at the same time, with all the regulations, how do you actually speed the processes within your company? Because the low-level automation is done, but then you need to use AI. To me, AI is really, it tells you, in fact, what to automate in the first place. So some of this is really about being able to get to all the data sources you have within the company and the different silos. So what we offer in Broadcom is really a platform which we call automation.ai, which is part of the thing what Arnold went through, the operational intelligence. It's built on open source, things like Elastic and Spark, machine learning, Apache Spark, and it uses all open source. And it can connect to the different silos and the data and apply machine learning. And I like the analogy Arnold used in terms of the three aspects of it, right? You need hindsight, so you need to look at your historical information and learn from it. And being able to see what's happening now in real time, and then you have to predict and have foresight where you're going. So truly, in order to do that, we can combine those things in terms of understanding what happened, where we are today and where we are going, and you can make intelligent choices of. And then other thing is you can't allow these things to be where you find a problem and then fix it later. That's being very reactive. So having that foresight will start allowing you to automate things. So you also want to act on things before they actually cause problems. So part of it is we have also done is build more of a recommendation engine. So that's just like Netflix. If you watch Netflix, you watch movies, and it recommends you what movies to watch. So you can similarly apply to your AIOps environment or DevOps environments to learn from it and make recommendations and use that with the highest, whatever the highest probability is to solve that. So some of the things what we find is, depending on organization, there is different metrics you can actually use. So this is something where we have found companies in different areas where, regardless of the organization, whether it's a development team, an operation team, they look at different OKRs and KPIs. So for transforming experience, for example, yes, you can monitor your environments and find problems, but you also want to tie it to the highest business priorities. So it's, in this case, looking at customer churn and retention, what's the cost of losing a customer? So we kind of look at these aspects across and improving confidence. So part of it is really about bringing the silos, the transparency, and the visibility across. And you can't solve the department. Everybody cannot be reorganized to report to one person in the company and make sure everybody does that, right? Every company has functional expertise. And so what we find is, we talk about security, for example. So if you have a problem in the operations side and if your experience is not that great, is it because there's a security attack, or is it because of an application problem, or is it a network problem? So what we look at is more from a holistic perspective, end-to-end, where it's not just about either systems, it's operations or network. And one of the pictures Arnold showed was he has the SOC, Security Operating Center, combined with the network operating center together. So how do you bring correlations between what's happening on the operations side with security? So you want to have digital trust. So if you go to Disney World or Disneyland, many times they use magic bands to, when you go and take a ride, it collects a lot of information about you. If you have children, it takes that information, it is a payments, but it makes the experience very simple, but it also needs to protect the privacy and the data, and also it's a payment system. So how do you combine? So the last thing is you need to be able to have great experience in the context of trust. Especially here in Europe with GDPR and others, you cannot assume that you can take anybody's data and use that to apply AI, because you also have to respect the privacy. There is bias in the data. So part of it is really what we can offer. One of the things I will, from Broadcom perspective is, at no charge, we do workshops with companies where we come in and look at the different groups and look at what outcomes you are trying to drive, what specific areas where you need to prioritize to improve, and where you can look at what type of data, how do you build the transformation journey, and what is your architecture. So we have our own roadmap. We can share that with you, because if you are building something on open source, we can do that. And we have leading market products like Clarity for portfolio management and Rally for agile development. We got BlazeMeter, continuous testing platform, which is open source based, like Tesla and others use this product. We have AIOps solution, which is again built on open source for monitoring, and of course Atomic for automation and API management layer 7. So we won't go into. We have a booth if you want to find out a 511 if you want to find out more about it. But I'll pause here and see if you have questions for me or Arnold. in the next few minutes, which is left in the session. Anyone has any questions in the audience? All right, we have 2 minutes left, but if you have any individual questions for me or Honor, please feel free to come and reach out to us. Thank you very much for taking the time this morning.